Our cousin Lucy, the last person I expected to see.
It would be terrible if it reached his mother. I have no fortune, you know.
When we talk about the characters of Sense and Sensibility, the ones who first come to mind are usually Eleanor, Marianne, and perhaps Willoughby and Brandon. But Austen's genius lies in her supporting cast, those seemingly peripheral characters who shape the emotional and moral framework of the story just as deeply. We saw this in Pride and Prejudice, and let's face it, Jane Austen doesn't write monologues, does she? The depth of her stories relied on subplots and plot twists, which almost always involved those peripheral characters. And so in this episode, I want to begin not with heroes and heroines, but with one of the more complex and quietly disruptive characters in the entire novel, Lucy Steele. And I'll be exploring her sister Anne's role in the story too, though in a different way. These are women who don't inspire admiration, but they do demand our attention. Lucy is strategic, composed, and probably as dangerous with a smile as most might be with a sword, and by contrast is unaware, chaotic, but ultimately just as pivotal in the story's unravelling. Together they expose not only the fragile hopes of Eleanor Dashwood, but the deeper cracks in society Austen is so brilliantly critiquing. So let's spend a little time with the Steele sisters and consider what they reveal about power, survival, and the cost of quiet ambition. When Lucy is first introduced, she appears charming, demure, and even deferential. She's eager to please, quick to flatter, and on the surface, utterly agreeable. But is this all a performance?
Look, the weather is much brighter. I wonder, Miss Dashwood, would you do me the honour of taking the air with me?
We quickly learn that Lucy has been secretly engaged to Edward Ferrars for about 4 years, a fact she reveals to Eleanor not because she trusts her, but to test her, and perhaps more importantly, to stake her claim.
Not with him. I never saw him in my life. But with his elder brother, we are engaged.
Lucy possibly sees Eleanor as a quiet threat, and her revelation becomes a way of planting her flag. A subtle warning masked as confidence. It's almost as if she's saying, he's mine, don't get any ideas. Lucy's decision to reveal the engagement doesn't happen immediately upon meeting Eleanor. It happens after she spent time observing her. Austen gives us this slow burn deliberately. Lucy is not impulsive, she's calculated. So the choice to reveal her secret to Eleanor, and only Eleanor, comes after Lucy begins to notice a few things. And what, you may ask, might those few things be? Well, Edward spends time with Eleanor. When he's at Norland, Edward is clearly lingering. He's not just tolerating the Dashwoods, he seems emotionally engaged, particularly with Eleanor. Austen shows us this not through declarations, but through proximity, awkwardness, and the sort of hesitant warmth that marks early affection. Eleanor is composed, but not unreadable. Lucy is emotionally intelligent, even if she lacks depth. She can see the softness in Eleanor's manner, her attentiveness, her quiet concern, the subtle protectiveness in how she speaks about Edward. Lucy, as someone perpetually reading a room to survive, would absolutely pick up on this. Fanny Dashwood likely gossiped. While we don't see it directly in the novel, it's not a stretch to believe that Fanny might have been making passing remarks about Eleanor's suitability or potential fondness for Edward.
Edward is entirely the kind of compassionate person upon whom penniless women can prey.
Remember, Lucy and Anne are later hosted by Fanny in London, so there is established contact on that part, and Lucy may have been gathering prior intel.
Anne and I arrived here only this afternoon, and we've been invited to stay for the whole week.
It's not that Lucy knows something definitive is happening, it's that she senses a threat. And the moment she does, she acts. But she doesn't confront Eleanor directly. That's not Lucy's style. She wraps her move in a bow of false friendship and emotional vulnerability.
Any manner of question, if that is of any help.
Thank you. I wonder, are you at all acquainted with your sister-in-law's mother, Mrs. Ferris?
In that moment, Lucy establishes dominance over Edward by referring to him as my Edward. She locks Eleanor into silence by framing the secret as sacred. She tests Eleanor's reaction for any telltale signs of jealousy or dismay. It's clever, calculated, and clearly prompted by Lucy's growing awareness that Edward's feelings have shifted, and that Eleanor Dashwood, with all her quiet grace, may already have more of his heart than Lucy ever truly did.
If anyone finds out, it will ruin him. Promise me you'll not tell us all.
I give you my word.
This moment works because Eleanor is forced to absorb the emotional blow without protest. It's a key turning point for Eleanor's arc, one where she realises her private hopes were not as private as she thought, and that her own quiet affection has consequences she cannot control. Lucy isn't just staking a claim, she's defending a territory she believes is under siege. In the 2008 version, this scene is rendered beautifully, with Lucy's sweetness undercut by tension.
And you promise you'll not breathe a word of this to a single soul?
I never sought your confidence, Miss Steele. But your secret is safe with me.
This moment, the confession of the secret engagement, is crucial. It's a moment straight out of the social chessboard that Austen loves to play with, quiet, calculated, and completely unprovable. Eleanor has no recourse. She must carry the burden of this knowledge silently while continuing to live in Lucy's company and suffer through her manipulations and backhanded remarks. Lucy isn't cruel in a direct way. She's not a villain in the traditional sense. She's clever, observant, and perhaps most tragically, entirely a product of her own time. With no fortune and no family name to recommend her, Lucy knows that the only way she can secure a future is through a good marriage, and she intends to hold on to Edward even as he drifts further away from her in affection, in values, in spirit. Let's be clear here, Edward is the eldest Ferrers' sibling. Between himself, Robert and Fanny, is Edward who stands to inherit the bulk of the Ferrers' fortune, and that's precisely what Lucy has aligned herself with. Not love, not duty, but future wealth. Her secret engagement, maintained for 4 years, isn't an act of romance, it's a strategic investment, an investment she fully intends to cash in on one way or the other. So when Edward loses his inheritance, Lucy doesn't weep, she recalculates.
Unless you abandon this ridiculous plan, you will have nothing from me, nothing at all. Do you understand?
But this all raises the question, was there ever any real affection between Lucy and Edward to begin with? Austen gives us only a glimpse into their past, but what we see suggests something closer to youthful folly than genuine love. Their engagement, formed in secret years before the story begins, is described as foolish, idle inclination. And by the time we meet Edward, that inclination has cooled into obligation. He's no longer in love, if indeed he ever truly was, but he's too honourable to end it.
Eleanor, I met Lucy when I was very young. Had I had an active profession, I should never have felt such an idle, foolish inclination.
Lucy, for her part, may have mistaken his quiet nature for faithfulness or devotion, or perhaps she simply never cared whether his feelings ran deep, only that the match did. Lucy is then, in many ways, a foil to Eleanor Dashwood. Both are women who suffer in silence. Both are drawn to Edward. Both endure emotional distress they cannot fully express. But where Eleanor maintains dignity and honesty, Lucy manipulates. Where Eleanor internalizes pain, Lucy externalizes it as power. You might say that Lucy is what Eleanor could become if she were to abandon her integrity in favour of survival. The quiet power of Lucy's manipulation lies in how civil it is. Her quiet revelation that she has been secretly engaged to Edward Ferrars for 4 years is framed not as a boast, but as a confession.
May I ask if your engagement is of long standing?
We have been engaged these 4 years.
4 years?
Yes.
She wraps the truth in false vulnerability.
And you promise you'll not breathe a word of this to a single soul? Miss Dashwood, Eleanor, you promise?
It sounds like intimacy, but it is really a warning. What makes this moment so agonizing, especially for Eleanor, is that Lucy says everything she needs to say without ever being overt. There's no warning, no rebuke, just an elegant, delivered reminder that Edward belongs to her. She never says, stay away from him. She doesn't need to. Instead, she fills the air with indirect possessiveness. He writes me such sweet letters. He is so devoted. Does this leave Eleanor feeling trapped, bound by her own honour, forced to suffer in silence? She's caught between her own feelings and her strong moral compass. She doesn't argue or object, and she doesn't protest. She simply listens and quietly resolves to say nothing. Not because she must, but because she knows it would be dishonourable to do otherwise. That small shift reframes Eleanor not as a passive victim, but as someone making a painful, principled choice, which is more in line with both her character and her interpretive tone. The 2008 adaptation captures this tension beautifully. Lucy is perfectly composed, and Eleanor's restraint becomes almost painful to watch.
I have his picture, and he has a lock of my hair that I gave him set in a ring.
The 95 version plays it more subtly. Their scenes together are quieter, less loaded, but the same power play is happening beneath the surface.
Oh, I had to come and tell you, for you cannot imagine what has happened.
No, I cannot.
Yesterday, I was introduced to Edward's mother.
In that scene, Lucy becomes a kind of passive-aggressive villain, not through cruelty, but through emotional calculation. She's not fighting Eleanor. It's like she's fencing with her, with every sentence a guarded thrust. And the viewer is left wondering, is Lucy really cruel, or is she simply playing the game that society demands of her? Let's take a moment with Anne Steele. I'm including her here in Lucy's video in the same way I did with Louise and Caroline Bingley. They come as a pair. Anne Steele enters the novel as comic relief, the kind of character who talks too much, laughs at the wrong things, and seems utterly unaware of the room around her. But Austen gives Anne something surprisingly powerful, a loose tongue, and perfect timing.
I always say the wrong thing. Yes, you do.
What I found interesting and perhaps a little strange in the 2008 adaptation is the fact that Anne talks with an accent while Lucy doesn't. Anne Steele is portrayed with a thick West Country or southwestern English accent.
No, indeed, we've seen him very often. He comes to see us very regular.
Ooh-ar, which immediately sets her apart from the more refined speech of characters like Eleanor, Lucy, and most of the genteel cast. Now, I suspect that this was absolutely a case of poetic license on the part of Andrew Davies, and there's no textual evidence in Austen's original novel that Anne, or Lucy for that matter, has any regional accent. Austen rarely ever describes accents directly. What she gives us instead is diction, the way a character speaks, what kind of words they use, the syntax, how educated or affected their speech sounds, and tone and content, where their thoughts reveal intelligence, refinement, or silliness. Anne Steele in the novel is portrayed as vulgar, gossipy, and socially awkward, but not geographically distinct. Her speech is littered with malapropisms, over-familiarity, and a lack of restraint, but she and Lucy are understood to be from the same background. And in Austen's world, they likely would have had similar accents, especially as sisters raised together.
London is full of smart beaux, and some of them very rude and naughty. We have been pushed and pummeled. Look at the nasty beasts, how they preen and ogle.
In Austen's novel, and in the 2008 adaptation, it's Anne Steele who lets the truth slip. Not deliberately, and certainly not maliciously. She simply talks too much, and in doing so, accidentally exposes the engagement that Lucy has spent years hiding.
Why, that Lucy and Edward are sweethearts. They've been engaged these 4 years.
Fanny Dashwood receives the news, just as she does in the book, and the result is immediate. Edward is disinherited. But in the 95 adaptation, where Anne doesn't appear at all, the script takes a different path. Lucy herself reveals the engagement to Fanny, a practical adjustment, but one that significantly alters the tone of the scene. What was once an accidental, chaotic moment becomes a comedic performance. Fanny's reaction is physical and exaggerated, snorting, shrieking, tossing pillows. And while it's entertaining, the emotional stakes are softened. More importantly, the dynamic between Lucy and her secret shifts. In the novel, Anne's slip-up undermines Lucy's careful control. It's the beginning of Lucy losing her grip on the future she spent so long securing. But in the 95 version, Lucy's decision to reveal the engagement makes her appear more composed, more calculating, and far more in charge of the situation.
I am the soul of discretion.
If I dare tell,
I can assure you, I am as silent as the grave.
It's a small change in storytelling terms, but a big one in character interpretation. One version gives Lucy power, the other takes it from her, and that difference between control and chaos speaks volumes about how Austen constructs tension and how adaptations translate it. What makes this moment so effective is its contrast to Lucy's calculated control. Lucy has kept her secret for years, knowing it could jeopardize Edward's future. Anne blurts it out without a second thought, not to cause harm, but because she doesn't understand the value of silence. In doing so, she becomes the catalyst for everything that follows. Edward is disinherited. Eleanor is freed from her emotional purgatory. Lucy is forced to rethink her future. Anne, the most overlooked character in the room, is the one who changes everything. And Jane Austen does this often, using fools to speak the truth others cannot or will not say. Anne may not be clever, but her presence shifts the narrative. And in a novel so carefully built on what people hide and what they reveal, her lack of subtlety becomes a powerful narrative device. It's a reminder that sometimes in Austen's world, chaos, not cleverness, is what sets things right. One of the most surprising turns in Lucy Steele's arc is how quickly she abandons Edward once he is disinherited. For 4 years, she's clung to the engagement, careful to protect it. Then the moment it no longer offers security, she shifts her allegiance to Robert Ferrars, Edward's younger and now wealthier brother.
May I present Miss Lucy Steele?
Charmed.
To the modern reader, this looks like betrayal. To an Austen reader, it's something more complicated, a strategic pivot. Lucy isn't acting out of passion, she's acting out of necessity. She's a woman in a world that punishes poverty and rewards propriety. If she can't marry Edward, she'll marry into his wealth through the next best option. This moment isn't just a character twist, it's social commentary. Austen doesn't punish Lucy, nor is she fully endorsing her. She's showing us a world where ambition and timing can override integrity. One of the enduring mysteries of the novel is this: why does Mrs. Ferrers, who disowned Edward for being engaged to Lucy, later seem perfectly happy with Lucy marrying Robert?
Your brother shall have all your inheritance, and you can starve on the streets for all I care.
Interestingly, I'll put it on screen, I received a comment noting that no adaptation fully explains how Lucy ends up with Robert. And it's true, many gloss over this, but the novel makes it clear. Lucy simply follows the money. Once Edward is disinherited and Robert is elevated, Lucy shifts course without hesitation. It's not about love, it's about access. And Austen lets that action stand without apology. It's tempting to shrug this off as inconsistency, but perhaps there's more to it. Edward, for all his decency, never reflected his mother's values. He wanted a quiet life, free of display or ambition.
All I have ever wanted is the quiet of a private life, but my mother is determined to see me distinguished.
Mrs. Ferrers may have tolerated him as heir, but she likely wished for a different son in that role. So when Edward is disinherited, Lucy swiftly attaches herself to Robert, the polished, eager, socially driven younger son. Everything aligns. Lucy gets her fortune, Robert gets his mother's favour, and Mrs. Ferrers gets to preserve her pride. The hypocrisy is galling, but in Austen's world, it is also entirely believable. Let's break it down a little. Firstly, Edward is not the kind of son Mrs. Ferrers wants to showcase. He's modest, introspective, uninterested in wealth, and unambitious. Austen tells us outright that he desires a quiet domestic life, possibly in the clergy.
Pony and Trap would do me very well. I want to go into the church, you see. Quiet country parish. But that's not smart enough for my family.
Far from the kind of heir a status-obsessed matriarch would hope for. Next, Robert, though somewhat foolish, reflects Mrs. Ferrers' values. He's flashy, superficial, and socially motivated, just like his mother.
Edward? God, no. The fellow shuns society. But my brother Edward is something of a hobbledehoy.
He says all the right things about wealth, rank, fashion, and appearances. In short, he's shallow but presentable, the perfect ornament for a woman who prizes image above all else. So once Edward is disinherited, Mrs. Ferrers is free to favour Robert. So now she has no obligation to pretend affection or admiration for Edward. Robert becomes her new proxy, her public face. Lucy, once attached to Edward, is now repositioned, and since she's marrying the right son, suddenly becomes socially acceptable. Lucy adapts faster than anyone. She's no longer a liability. She's now part of Mrs. Ferrers' preferred lineage. The marriage works because it now reinforces Mrs. Ferrers' vision of status and control. Mrs. Ferrers likely tolerated Edward as heir because of his primogeniture, but may have secretly wished he were more like Robert. Austen doesn't write this out loud, but she lays the groundwork for us to interpret it. In both the 1995 and the 2008 adaptations, this change is understated, almost glossed over, but in the novel, the shift is so sudden it feels like a sleight of hand. Lucy doesn't mourn, she doesn't hesitate, she moves, and in doing so, she forces us to ask, what does society truly reward, sincerity or strategy? Now, I know this video is about Lucy, but it leads me to think that I should add this section about Edward here, although I will go deeper into it when I get to his own character analysis. But what I've said about Lucy pivoting to Robert and gaining the approval of Mrs. Ferrers, what if Edward might have wanted this to happen, even if he couldn't admit it? Edward is constantly under pressure to perform, to marry well, present well, and live according to his mother's ambitions, but not to his own. He's a deeply honourable man. but he's also exhausted by expectations he doesn't believe in. Disinheritance, while painful, might actually feel like liberation. He loses a fortune, but gains his independence. Perhaps he has a secret hope that Lucy will break it off. After all, when confronted by his mother, he's swift to confirm the engagement and ask for her blessing. That quick response is so telling to me. It's like, here's my chance. I'm going to take it.
Yes, it is true, Mother. And I ask your blessing for us both.
Edward's promise to Lucy was made in youth, rash, misplaced, and now a noose around his neck. But he won't break it. It would be dishonourable. So maybe, just maybe, he hopes that by holding the line, staying loyal, she'll lose interest once the wealth disappears, which is exactly what happens. Lucy doesn't choose love, she chooses money. And Edward, I think, sees that coming. Of course, Jane Austen never shows Edward manipulating the situation, but he clearly cares for Eleanor and suffers deeply when the engagement with Lucy blocks him from her. The moment he's freed, he goes to Eleanor, not out of opportunism, but with the relief and hope that he has. It feels like he's finally allowed to make a choice that's his. His life, for once, aligns with his heart.
I do not think it is the Colonel.
It must be. He said he would arrive today.
And so by honouring his youthful promise, he loses his inheritance. But in doing so, he also frees himself from a future he never really wanted. One shaped by his mother's ambitions, but not by his own. And perhaps, deep down, he suspected what Lucy would do next. That once the fortune vanished, so too would her devotion. Maybe he even hoped Lucy would do exactly what she did, choose his richer brother. Because in that choice, Lucy reveals herself completely. She shows Edward and us that her affections were always aligned with fortune, not fidelity. And in that moment, her arc closes. The very thing she'd clung on to for 4 years, Edward's inheritance, slips from her grasp. She pivots to Robert, and she succeeds. But not without cost, because now we see her clearly. So does Edward, and so does Eleanor. In many ways, Lucy Steele and Eleanor Dashwood are placed in direct narrative contrast, not as romantic rivals, but as philosophical opposites. They share the same central obstacle, a love for Edward Ferrars, but they approach this emotional terrain with vastly different tools. Eleanor leads with integrity and restraint, while Lucy leads with calculation and charm. Eleanor suffers quietly. She swallows heartache with dignity, never speaking ill of Lucy, never showing jealousy, never once betraying Lucy's confidence, even though every word costs her. Lucy, on the other hand, orchestrates her presence in Eleanor's life with precision. She chooses when to reveal the engagement, when to reassert it, and when to apply pressure with carefully chosen words. Lucy performs control, Eleanor practices it. What's striking is how Austen never directly condemns Lucy. She doesn't make her into a full villain, nor does she present Eleanor as a saint. Both women are reacting to the world that offers them limited power. Lucy adapts, Eleanor endures. The contrast isn't about morality, it's about survival. In a society where marriage is the only form of upward mobility for women, Eleanor's honesty becomes a quiet form of rebellion, refusing to play the game. Lucy, meanwhile, embraces the system, even outsmarts it. Her engagement may be mercenary, but she's playing the only hand she was dealt, and playing it to win. The real question Austen leaves us with is this: what kind of woman survives in this world? The one who waits and suffers, or the one who adjusts and acts? And as viewers, are we cheering for the most moral outcome or the most realistic one? So it's easy to dismiss Lucy Steele as the villain of the piece. She is, after all, manipulative, emotionally calculating, and alarmingly adaptable. But Austen doesn't give us that satisfaction. She doesn't punish Lucy, she lets her succeed. And in doing so, she invites us to look more critically at the world Lucy operates in, a world that rewards appearance over principle, and where silence is as dangerous as speech. Anne, for her part, speaks too much, and in doing so becomes the most accidental catalyst of all. Her presence is comedic, but her impact is unmistakable. So the next time you revisit Sense and Sensibility, keep an eye on the margins, because it's in those quieter characters, those supposed side figures, that Austen often places her sharpest truths. I've enjoyed that. Thank you for being with me for this character study. I will be back with another one soon, and I will be focusing on Mrs. Jennings, whose meddling nature hides something more tender beneath the surface. If you can't wait for the next episode, feel free to jump on one of my other channels, see what other shenanigans I get up to. I do photography, I do history, and I do driving. Anyway, that was Lucy Steele, first in my series for Sense and Sensibility. Don't forget, comment below. Did I get it right? Was I on par? These are just my musings, but I do like diving deep into the character analysis. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.